Assalamu alaikum. In other words, peace be on you all. On behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in Bermuda, I would like to welcome you. We will open this symposium with a reading from the Holy Scriptures. I would like to invite Hafiz Mubarak to recite a few verses from the Holy Quran with English translation. Hafiz Mubarak is originally from Nigeria and now resides in Chicago. He is a Hafiz, i.e. someone who has memorized the entire Quran in Arabic. Following the recitation of the Holy Quran, Reverend Petit from the St. Paul Anglican Church will read a short passage from the Holy Bible. Hafiz Mubarak, please.
Good afternoon. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to recite from the Quran, the Arabic text, and also then I'm going to read the translation. I'm reciting from chapter 59 of the Quran, from verses 22 to 25. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لو أنزلنا وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله if we had sent down this Quran on a mountain, thou would suddenly have seen it humbled and rent asunder for the fear of God. And these are similitudes that we set forth for mankind that they may reflect. He is God, and there's no one worthy of worship beside him, the knower of the unseen and the seen. He is the gracious, the merciful. He is God, and there is none worthy of worship beside him, the sovereign, the Holy One, the source of peace, the bestower of security, the protector, the mighty, the subduer, the exalted. Only is he, far above that which they associate with him. He is God, the creator, the maker, the fashioner. These are the most beautiful names. All that is in the heavens and the earth glorifies him. And he is the mighty, the wise.
I'm the priest in charge of St Paul's Anglican Church in Paget, so I've chosen a passage from one of St Paul's writings, his letter to the church in Philippi in Macedonia. This is chapter 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything with prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure and whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things.
Thank you, Hafiz Mubarak. On behalf of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community Bermuda, we would like to welcome you to this Social Peace Symposium. Allow me to briefly introduce the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community was founded in 1889 by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad on Holy Peace of Qadian in India. He claimed to be the expected reformer of the latter days and the awaited one of the world's religions, whose advent was foretold by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of God be upon him, and the Holy Scriptures of major religions. Hazrat Ahmad, on whom be peace, mission is to spread peace on earth through the revival of the true teachings of Islam and bring about in people's heart the love of God, compassion towards all creatures of God. These are not new teachings, but rather are the pristine message of peace, which was revealed to the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of God be upon him 1400 years ago. This might come as a surprise to some due to the violent portrayal of Islam often reported in the media. However, Islam rejects all forms of violence, and the Holy Quran teaches us there is no compulsion in religion. The community spans over 200 countries with membership exceeding tens of millions. Its headquarters are in the UK. The community is led by a system of khilafah, or spiritual leadership. His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, may God strengthen his hands, is the community's fifth Khalifa, and he's based in London. The motto of the community is love for all, hatred for none. Today's Social Peace Symposium is a unique event, crossing bridges and removing all barriers with a message of peace. As taught in the Holy Quran and from the examples from the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing of God be upon him, we aspire to working hand in hand with other faiths and organizations to promote social peace, to safeguard human values, and more importantly, to serve humanity and the people of Bermuda with humility and kindness. And we are fortunate today to have a panel of experts here to enlighten us. I'm pleased to hand over to Mr. Gordon Riley, Chairman of CURB, who will moderate the panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to be participating in this event along with the Muslim community. And my role is an easy one, to just moderate today's session. I wish to acknowledge all our visitors today. I see some distinguished ones, for your distinguished visitors, the Mayor of Hamilton, Charles Gosling, U.S. Consul General, Ms. Grace Shelton, Imam Basima Mwakil, I should know because that's my first cousin, and to everybody else in the audience and any others who I don't recognize, please forgive me. I'm glad that you came out today for this Social Peace Symposium. Our first speaker today is Reverend Dr. Kim Dismont Robinson. Reverend Dr. Kim Dismont Robinson currently serves as a folklore officer for the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs, Governor of Bermuda. Since 2005, she has been responsible for producing cultural publications, write-in-residence, programs, folklore, documentaries, heritage programs, and other projects supporting the development of cultural, historical, and creative materials available in Bermuda. In addition to her scholarly and professional writing, she is also a playwright and poet. Her play, Trial by Fire, Setting Vast Streams of Consciousness, was first staged in 2006 and later restaged for the African Diaspora Heritage Trail Conference in 2008. Her play, Emancipation, A Love Story, was performed in Bermuda during the 2009th anniversary year and was later filmed for distribution on DVD. And in 2010, she was ordained as an interfaith minister by the New Seminary based in New York City. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kim Dismont Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cordell. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you. And I would like to begin by acknowledging the efforts of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community for organizing this seminar, since interfaith dialogue is something that's often touted in theory here in Bermuda, but not necessarily in practice. And if the religious leaders of this community can't find a way to talk to each other, I really don't see how we can expect the common man to love his neighbor as himself, especially if his neighbor has a problem with addiction, or a teenage son that is always playing his music too loud at night. We all need to do better with this, and remember, as the columnist Larry Birchall pointed out years ago, that any problem can be on your doorstep in 60 minutes or less if you live in Bermuda. Here, more than most places, we really are all connected. When I first began my studies to become an interfaith minister some years ago, I became aware that despite the diversity in structure, law, and belief systems that manifest in different world religions, the golden rule, also known as the ethic of reciprocity, is a concept that is consistent across faiths. Since the paths of religions diverge at other points, this seemed like an appropriate place to begin a discussion on our theme of social peace. I wanted to begin by speaking about some of the social problems that currently exist here in Bermuda. draw some parallels with such issues that exist elsewhere in the world, and use that as a springboard to speak about the possibilities for healing before turning the floor over to my co-speakers. So, I'm 37 years old, and I believe that I am part of the last generation of Bermudians who can remember my mother leaving the house unlocked when she drove into town, who then left her car unlocked as she ran her errands, and who came back to both the unlocked car and the unlocked house without any sense of anxiety about whether someone may have robbed her in the interim. Most people will acknowledge this with a shrug of the shoulders that Bermuda has changed. After all, so is the rest of the world, and why should we be any different? Besides, the issue of locking the house and car, of course, pale in comparison to the reality that we now face of shootings and murder. Although the impact of theft is, of course, much less than the extreme tragedy involved with loss of life, I want to sit with this for a minute. The act of locking up someone's home, in particular, speaks to a mentality that has been born from a place of insecurity and apprehension. It speaks to a distrust of one's neighbor in the broadest sense of the term, of one's community at large, and a very real fear of violation. This was not a fear that my mother grew up with, and not because thieves didn't exist in the 1960s in Bermuda. However, this brings us back to my opening train of thought regarding the Golden Rule. Part of the social fabric that made up the ghost of Bermuda past was woven from a very clear understanding of the Golden Rule. There were house building parties that used to take place where groups of men would get together to help a friend build his home from Bermuda stone, each building their own sets of skills to put to the task. This was done as a way of helping your friend create a home for his new wife and the family that he hoped to build. But it was also done because you knew that one day you hoped to build a house, and you were dependent upon this same group of men to help achieve this goal. This spirit of cooperation came from seeing your neighbor as a brother or a sister, as well as an appreciation that you were part of a unit that was greater than yourself. It's my understanding, however, that the frequency of these house-building parties in Bermuda began to diminish because the men who entered into these tasks in good faith were sometimes betrayed. That once a house was built, the owner forgot who stood by him and helped him lay the slabs of stone. And perhaps this is a reflection of a larger move in Bermuda away from the true concept of community and towards an individualism that none of us can afford. It is sad that my 6-year-old daughter knows about guns, knows about other children who don't have daddies because guns have taken them away. It's sad that she, like most other children in Bermuda, are aware that a nameless hatred exists here in their island home that is so extreme that it can wipe a person out of existence. It is sad that she checks the door when we come in the house after school to make sure I've remembered to lock it. I recognize that what I'm saying about the loss of Bermuda's innocence and the ability to grow up without the pervasive threat of violence is nothing new. However, I do want to put this in perspective. Bermuda was never innocent. Although 25 years ago there was less of a chance that we would break into each other's homes, we hurt each other in other kinds of ways. We blackballed people who thought differently from us. We were terribly racist. We cheated on our wives and our husbands. We gossiped venomously against each other. We abused children physically, emotionally, and sometimes sexually. We socially ostracized people. We deliberately whispered things into ears that caused people's mortgages to get pulled. And we managed to wreak all kinds of destruction and havoc in each other's lives without ever needing to take that extra step to break into a house and walk off with the good china. We instead stole gifts of the spirit. And it is precisely from these thefts that happened right here in Bermuda 25, 50, 100, 300 years ago that spiritually bereft conditions were created that have bred some of the social ills that we now see today. I think it's not at all helpful to talk about a return to the past and how we were as a way to remedy our problems and create social peace. For one, as I've just illustrated, there were a lot of ways in which we weren't too show off to begin with. Secondly, the one thing consistent in this universe other than the love of our Creator is the certainty of change. We can never return. We can never go back. Because we as Bermudians are no longer that people. We are someone else. We are a different people. And we must first determine what our new face looks like before we can figure out how best to create solutions that speak to our current reality. Following the massive earthquake that devastated Haiti in 2010, there was a global sensitization to the plight of Haitian people. Not just about the earthquake that killed almost 250,000 people, but also the deforestation and poverty and crumbling infrastructure that made the relief efforts so difficult. Bermuda's economic recession had already begun, and it was at the peak of some of the gang shootings we've had over the years. However, Bermudians of all walks of life, in the face of such human tragedy, were able to step out and beyond themselves to think about ways they might help. This moment of national empathy that we experienced was important for us. Bermudians are often so isolated from other islands and cities that it's sometimes easy to forget that there's more out there in the world than just us. I think what provoked this empathetic turn had to do with putting certain things in perspective. Bermudians, and indeed the world, witnessed the generosity of Haitians in their interactions with their compatriots, with oftentimes nothing left of their material possessions beyond the clothing on their backs. The only event in recent local history that evoked that kind of community spirit here in Bermuda was probably the camaraderie that existed following Hurricane Fabian in 2004. And as the scale of disasters go, it's almost embarrassing to even mention the two events in the same sentence. In the face of absolute and total devastation, Haitians found a way to live, even when living conditions were horrific. It was this thought that led to the title of my talk, which is In the Heads of the People. Joan Diane, author of Haiti, History and the Gods, discusses the deep sense of spirituality that has sustained the people of Haiti throughout a history that has been punctuated by violence, exploitation, and devastation. She states that writers historicize the Haitian majority by attending to the one thing that remains in a landscape of loss, the heritage of Guinea, preserved in the services for the gods. Trees inhabited by or sacred to the spirits that can be uprooted by American companies, but the Loa, the gods, still come into the heads of the people. By this, Diane means that the Haitian people are not dependent upon a building of worship or specific religious rites or holy artifacts to maintain their connection with the divine. The gods inhabit the heads of the people. Their spirituality walks with them, and this is part of the way that they are able to find strength. What might it mean for God to inhabit our heads? What would it mean as Bermudians for our most fundamental relationship with our Creator to exist solely within our heads and our hearts? And what might this mean in terms of the way that we as Bermudians relate to each other? We've talked about the fear of the other, of the unknown thief violating our homes, or the mysterious gunman who poses the threat to our neighborhood. However, on a very fundamental level, the building block for social peace must by necessity be found in the home, in the familial realm. The Trinidadian writer Merle Hodge wrote an essay more than 35 years ago entitled The Shadow of the Whip, which links the historical brutality out of which island nations in the New World were born with the legacy of violence that has infiltrated our most intimate personal relationships. Hodge suggests that the violence of Native American decimation, the African slave trade, and colonialism has been internalized by Caribbean people, resulting in violent relationships between adult and child, between black and white, between man and woman. I would like to quote at length a more recent article that she wrote for the Caribbean Review of Gender Studies entitled Commentary, Everyday Violence Against Children. In this article, published in 2010, Ms. Hodge states that when we speak of violence as a culture, we cannot surely be focusing mainly on the current statistics of violent crime. Despite the high visibility of acts of murder, and despite our understandable preoccupation with this danger, it is a fact that people who shoot and stab and chop up other human beings make up a very small percentage of the population. We could perhaps choose to see those people as belonging to a subculture that would neatly separate them from the rest of us, the righteous citizenry. But the culture of violence includes all of us, whether or not we have ever shot or chopped up anybody. Moreover, the high incidence of violence, crime, or violence clearly recognized as criminal is a recent phenomenon, but the culture of violence was there all the time. The fact that it was always a part of us might help to explain how it was so easy for an element of the population to jump up seemingly out of nowhere and start dispensing the kind of unthinking, remorseless violence that we are witnessing today. These manifestations cannot be separated from something more deep-seated that inhabits the whole society. The culture of violence cannot be defined only by outrageous acts of violence committed in the public sphere. I would like to locate that culture in a more intimate space and to identify it as a long-standing acceptance of violence as a normal, even necessary part of everyday human interaction. So Ms. Hodge goes on to talk about the thoughtless violence perpetuated against children on a daily basis. This is something that we see in Bermuda on a regular basis, and I'm not necessarily talking about the knockdown, black-eyed, bruised type of abuse. Like Hodge, I'm equally concerned about the verbal violence that becomes an assault on the ego, the kind of tongue lashings that children experience that cannot help but undermine whatever fledgling sense of self-esteem that they might possess. And if you don't believe me, take a ride on the number 10 bus from Hamilton one afternoon and just listen to the conversation between a mother and her 5-year-old son who, while admittedly is a bit fidgety, is a far cry in truth from the expletives that his mother may use to describe him that morning. In 10 years' time, when this same boy decides to give his allegiance to the Parkside gang and rejects anything his mother might have to say about that, is it any wonder that he doesn't want to accept the words issuing from her mouth? Is it any wonder that he thinks he must find a way to prove himself to someone, to the world? The one last point I'd like to make has to do with aesthetics. One's sense of aesthetics has to do with an appreciation of beauty and art. It is the simultaneous engagement of the senses and the emotion. And it's my assertion that social peace in Bermuda won't ever be attained until we rescue those whose senses have been dulled through neglect and whose emotions have remained unacknowledged through an active cultivation and recognition of these states. There was a television program I watched a few years ago, and I think it was 60 Minutes, that did a feature on former gang members in a country in a violent region of South America. In this report, the former gang members were all teenagers. Many had joined the gang when they were 9 or 10 years old, and so by the time they were 12 or 13, they had already become hardened criminals. These are the type of individuals that many people believe are beyond hope, beyond redemption, impossible to rehabilitate. But the astonishing method used to rehabilitate them in this report was very simple: music lessons. These teenage gangbangers came off the street and learned about Mozart, Beethoven, and developed a new appreciation for the rhythms of their own country's music. The musical education they received was like learning a new language, of becoming fluent in a language that spoke to emotion rather than the soundtrack of mayhem and blind allegiance that had been playing inside their heads. It was incredibly moving to hear teenagers, young men who hadn't even reached their 20th birthdays, talk about how the program had saved their lives, both in the rescue of their physical bodies, but perhaps equally importantly, in the rehabilitation of their minds. In Alison Yule's thesis entitled Gang Rehabilitation in El Salvador, she states, art is used by children and youth in communities as a means to reflect on their lives, to learn to express their feelings and their realities, their dreams, their aspirations, through different artistic manifestations. Instructors of experimental art guide their students to build their self-esteem and cultural identity and learn values such as friendship, respect, responsibility, tolerance, all of which will contribute to lowering their levels of violence. In our gang rehabilitation program, we use artistic mediums such as painting, drawing, and plasticine. Art plays an important role as a formation of expression during their lives with the gang. Graffiti is a form of being able to express themselves and their dissatisfactions when they feel that no one else is listening. Sometimes they become so violent that they lose their ability to communicate feelings in words, and art provides an outlet for wordless communication, without pressure and without words. In exploring possibilities for social peace in Bermuda, I've mentioned the importance of the golden rule, of being with harmony in the home, particularly where children are concerned, and of the necessity for art, culture, and the development of a sense of aesthetics for those who have already been hardened by life's circumstances. I'll conclude with one final thought on a tool that can be utilized which to some extent tie into all the previous points I've made, and that is the importance of service. There's perhaps nothing more spiritually and socially transformative than the act of showing love to another human being. There's an old saying that love isn't worth a damn unless it's used as a verb rather than as a noun. There has to be an active component rather than merely a thoughtful or emotional one in the expression of love for it to change someone else's life. There have been psychological studies conducted showing a clear link between giving and happiness. And forget the Prozac, one of the most effective ways of lifting non-clinical symptoms of depression is just to do something good for somebody else. Perhaps Bermuda's heretofore affluence has been paradoxically a partial culprit for the deterioration of our community. Perhaps our comfortable lifestyle has created a scenario where only under the extreme example of hurricane or gunshot that we can move beyond our immediate families, our neighborhoods, or our religious communities in order to help a stranger, a strange Bermudian or non-Bermudian resident who we don't know, but who's been caught out in the rain, who in the line in front of you needs a little bit of help paying for their prescription, who works nights to make ends meet and just needs an hour away from their child to collect their thoughts. Perhaps for a very long time, we haven't been thinking much about these people we see every day, but now is our chance. It's our chance to return to ourselves and to remember who we really are. Thank you.
So we need these things when we're in trouble. We thank Dr. Robinson for her creative approaches to social peace in Bermuda, and she's left much in our hands. Our next speaker is Reverend Anthony Patton. Reverend Anthony Patton grew up between post-war rural Nigeria and the industrial West Midlands of the United Kingdom. Having worked as a professional musician, he has a first-class BA honors in composition and early music performance and an MA in musicology and acoustics. Before ordination, he also worked in catering and youth work, the latter for 2 years in one of the most deprived areas of the UK, where his name was shortened because many of the children could not read. He likes to be known as Ant. He was ordained in the Church of England in 2001, latterly serving as vicar of Gradley, a diverse multicultural area of West Birmingham, before coming to Bermuda last year. His wife Ruth and he have been married for 14 years, and they have 2 children, Ben, 10, and Sam, 8. And Reverend Pettit will speak from the Christianity approach to social peace. Can you please join me in welcoming Reverend Pettit?
I'm not as eloquent a speaker, so I want to give you some pretty pictures to look at. I'm very grateful to the Ahmadiyya community for inviting the Right Reverend Dr. Patrick White, Bishop of Bermuda, to speak today. I'm less grateful to him for inviting me to speak on his behalf. Do I stand here before you today? The question may be going through your mind as an imperialist. Well, I'm English, male, white, middle class, Christian, and the beneficiary of what I'm told is a world-class education. Obviously then, I should believe everything I say today to be utterly virtuous, right, and if put into practice, the solution to all social ills. No? Okay then, perhaps you prefer something closer to the truth. I actually stand here before you today feeling a bit of a fraud. I don't actually believe my country of birth has very many good answers, unless you count helping others to learn by our mistakes. My gender and race seem to offer to me more opportunity and credit than I would otherwise warrant by my own efforts. And, well, my education leaves me feeling like I know less about life than when I started. Most of all, I am acutely aware of the damage done to human beings by those professing the Christian faith. Obviously then, I struggle with what I'm going to say today, as I don't really believe I have that much to offer personally. I'm a bit of a mess. I'm not able to speak for all Christians today. I'm not even able to speak for many Christians. I'm supposed to be here on behalf of the Anglican Church of Bermuda and its Bishop, the Right Reverend Dr. Patrick White, but even he may not agree with what I'm going to say. All I have then is my faith in Jesus Christ. I don't claim it to be any more of an answer to social peace than what you may know. I offer this presentation in the belief of my faith that whatever is good is revealed to me by the God of love. And whatever is poor in this, well, just put that down to being the product of my own lack of ability and that it's best forgotten. And if you're okay with that, I'll get on with it. What is a Christian perspective then on social peace? Well, first I guess it would be guarded. Christianity, like many religions, has a history of being hijacked by others in order to bring them power, often dealing out injustice, social disorder and subjugation of populations for evil ends. A Christian perspective on social peace would probably have to start by saying, well, we haven't been very good at it so far. However, as someone once said, if at first you don't succeed, try again. The Christian religion's lack of ability to so far demonstrate a society of peace, harmony and love is no excuse for us not to continue seeking a reign of justice, peace and love, as one of our Anglican prayers puts it. The starting point for a Christian perspective on social peace, to my mind, must be the startlingly obvious fact that we don't have social peace. But Christians believe that God desires that we should have it. As the Gospel writer Luke records the angel saying at the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, "Glory to God in the highest, and peace on earth to those on whom his favour rests." However, the reality is that we seem as a society to be moving further and further away from the ideal of peaceful communities living together in harmony at a local level, let alone on the global scale. But this should not be surprising to those of us who have a Christian faith, as it's one of the basic teachings of the early church that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. For the Christian, there is no such thing as a perfect life other than that of Jesus of Nazareth. There is no way in which a human can sort themselves out, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, or get their act together enough to put things right. Perfection, and therefore peace, are consequences, Christians believe, of God's actions in the world and not humanity's. Even the potential for social peace to exist is brought into question by Jesus himself, who declared, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace but a sword, for I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a man's enemies will be members of his own household." Therefore, social peace appears to be unobtainable for disciples of Jesus of Nazareth. It's all rather depressing. However, my faith teaches me that one of the problems I will face is the desire for a positive outcome, that we humans want to hear that we are progressing towards our goal. In the Hebrew Bible, I'll be calling it that rather than the Old Testament, as it is a series of texts that Christians share with Judaic faiths and is predominantly written in Hebrew, though not exclusively. So in the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Jeremiah confronts this part of our human condition when he accuses false prophets by saying, "They dress the wound of my people as though it were not serious. Peace, peace, they say, when there is no peace." There is no point in me saying, let's all be nice to each other and it will get better. That would be a lie. Social peace, if it is to be a reality, must face the truth of who we are as a society and seek practically to change the injustices and fractures that are causing the wounds. The problems are truly serious and complex, and I will not pretend otherwise. The cause of the problem, the cause of all social and personal ills in this world is, according to the Christian tradition, that human beings inevitably miss the target of love and end up causing more harm than good. Social peace is outside of our reach because our fundamental relationships are broken with God and with one another. The Christian tradition teaches that humans cannot repair those fractures. They cannot repair them themselves, and any attempt to do so outside of God's help is not only doomed to failure, but will make things worse. For the Christian, true social peace is instead seen in the divine relationship that is God. A perfect social peace that is God. Christians believe that in Jesus Christ, human beings are invited into this divine social peace, and so to become it. Nice theological words, but back in the real world, the Christian faith receives a teaching directly from Jesus that humans don't even want social peace. Jesus of Nazareth, speaking to his early listeners, said, "To what can I compare this generation? What are they like? They are like children sitting in the marketplace and calling out to each other, 'We played the flute for you and you didn't dance. We sang a dirge and you did not cry. For John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you said, he has a demon. And the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and you say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is proved right by her children.'" In other words, as human beings, we neither want doomsayers nor bleeding heart liberals. We just want peace sorted, but not by us. However, by playing on the idea of capricious children and wise children, Jesus is telling Christians that both the ministry of the truth teller and that of the healer bring forth peace. Those who hear the truth of the bewailing mourner of our world, and also the one who dances the dance of the healed world, both lead to social peace. In other words, more simply, it doesn't have to be this way. So I want to take you on a journey now, but I warn you, it's one that has some very difficult social situations. Some of what I'm about to show you is unpalatable, but I hope that I've shown that within the Christian tradition, facing the unpalatable is essential for social peace. And at the end of this, there is a message of hope. I make no apology for the fact that many of my examples come from situations in sub-Saharan Africa. This makes perfect sense within the Anglican Communion, as we are predominantly a sub-Saharan African church. Most Anglicans live in sub-Saharan Africa, and as a communion we share our stories of what is happening together. So some of us, perhaps via the Kony 2012 campaign, will be aware of a gang called the Lord's Resistance Army, or LRA, who have terrorised northern Uganda. Northern Uganda and southern Sudan for about 2 decades now, and have now expanded and moved into Congo and the DRC. Some may call them a militia, but as they have no aims and no anything other than power and control of people, I'm going to call them a gang. Indeed, the writer Robert Gassoni, in a report funded by the United States Embassy in Kampala in 1997, concluded that the LRA has no political program or ideology, at least none that the local population has heard or can understand. I warn you, this is quite disturbing. I don't have any volume. I don't have any volume, but essentially they are speaking about the difficulty of facing the frightening consequences of being attacked by children wielding machetes and guns, those who have been themselves forced into those kinds of actions by those who would persecute and torture them into even killing members of their own family. This gentleman is one of those. He has been arrested and prosecuted under Ugandan law. If you were to hear these stories, I'm sure they would make you want to do something about it. Usually, as with the Coney 2012 campaign, what it makes us want to do is make arrests, hold people to account, and possibly even have them face reparation and retribution. However, I have to tell you this is not the Christian path, or at least it is not the whole Christian path. There is a place for retribution and reparation in order to bring about social peace, but only within a framework of something else. Why am I showing this to you? Well, because this extreme example is how gangs operate and control persons who would not normally carry out actions of violence against others, let alone innocent others. It also helps us to confront the truth that in order for there to be social peace, there must be restoration of perpetrators to the community, forgiveness and reconciliation. These are, I understand, easy words to use, and the practicalities of seeing it happen are long and painful. What I'm saying is that from the Christian perspective, the problem is huge and there are no easy or sweet answers. In order for there to be social peace, the Christian tradition reveals that what is wrong must be challenged, not in order for retribution and punishment to be dealt out, but to begin a process of reconciliation, which we believe Christ has entrusted to his church. For instance, in the 18th century, prisons in the United Kingdom were full of people who had been convicted of all kinds of things. The Church of England sought to solve part of the problem and recovered enough of their faith to build modern-style prisons that had not only security and safety at their heart, but reconciliation with the community and hope for the future for those who had been convicted. Today, a prison in the UK is still constituted by a prison governor who sees to the security and the welfare of the establishment, and a chaplain who coordinates the pastoral care of prisoners. From a Christian perspective then, social peace is something we must be, rather than an ideal to obtain. We must be the peace which we ourselves seek. Peace must be made. I know it seems obvious, but for many, social peace is something that they don't feel empowered to have, let alone make. For the Christian, in the power of God's Holy Spirit, with him living in each one of us, we are full of peace, enabled to be peace for others and make peace where society is fractured. Putting into action the social peace that we want to be is an act of faith and worship for Christians. Today, this is displayed in the Anglican Church during acts of worship. We have a now 30-year-old action called the Peace. You have to understand that the Anglican Church does its theology not in books, but through its worship. Thus, the reputedly staid, fusty old Anglican Church, the sign of peace is a handshake accompanied by the words, "Peace be with you," to those who have joined in worship together. It is a first step on the road to being the social peace we seek. It didn't go down very well in some quarters, even in the Anglican Church, change is not something that's generally accepted as a lovely and good thing all of the time. I know you're terribly surprised by that. I'd love to be able to show you this video. It's absolutely hilarious, but you just have to take my word for it, so I can't get the sound to work. So instead, we'll move on. 30 years ago, the Anglican Church, or the Church of England as it was called, had a reputation as being predominantly white, boring, and the place you'd least be likely to go to find a community. However, like all reputations, it was untrue. But the Anglican Church